Hey everyone, welcome back to the Next Level Mindset Coaching Podcast, where we explore powerful tools and insights to transform your mind and unlock your true potential. I'm Tim Peterson, your host and mindset coach at nextlevelmindsetcoaching.com. If you or anyone that you know of is looking to take that next step in your life and reach that next level, please get in touch with me. I've got my coaching that I do, one-on-one coaching. We just over phone calls, but just to see if it's something that's right for you, I do have free, no obligation discovery calls, and you can go to the website nextlevelmindsetcoaching.com. Next is just spelled NXT, and there you can set an appointment with me for a free coaching call, a discovery call, to see if my coaching is going to work with you and if it's going to work for both of us. So again, I've got that coaching business that I've started, and I really feel like it can have a huge positive impact on people's lives. So with that, we're going to get into today's episode. There's going to be about a 4-part episode series that I'm going to be doing, and it's on breaking through mental barriers. And the first barrier that we're going to discuss is the fear of failure. Does that sound familiar to anybody? For example, so we've got mental barriers, which are the limiting beliefs and thoughts or fears that create resistance in our lives. They might be that internal voice that might say, "Oh, I'm not good enough," or "What if I fail? I don't want to do it in case I don't want to take a chance on failing," or perhaps you're concerned about people judging you, or maybe thinking that, "Oh, that's just too hard. Why should I even try?" It's maybe just not worth putting in the effort. But these thoughts, they create a mental cage, if you will. They can keep us from taking action. They can also prevent you from pursuing your dreams in some cases. They might even prevent you from thinking or believing that change is possible. They don't just come out of nowhere. They really do often, they're often shaped by past experiences, if you think about it. They're also shaped by, past criticisms that you may have had, or past traumas, or even some societal pressures. So here's the truth, okay? These barriers, they live in your mind, and that's where you also have the power to change them. So as we get into, as I mentioned, this mental barrier of fear of failure, this is one that shows up quite often and quite frequently for a lot of people. Someone might hesitate to start something just because failing would prove that maybe you're not good enough. But failure, it's feedback. It's not an identity. It's how we grow. And the one thing that I would like to elaborate on here, so the fear of failure it's the internal resistance that arises when you are about to try something new, or possibly take a risk, or even step outside your comfort zone. It might be that anxious voice in your head that says, well, what if I mess up? Or, what'll people think? I don't know if I'm ready. I'm not ready. Or failure means I'm not good enough. These might all be valid, thoughts that you have, that you tell yourself. But it's not just the act of failing that people fear. It's the meaning that they attach to it, if you think about it. So often we equate failure with shame, possibly rejection, or even possibility of proof that we're incapable. But let's think about it for a minute. Where could this fear of failure come from? There's a few things that come to mind. Possibly childhood conditioning. If you grew up in an environment where mistakes were criticized or punished, You may have learned to associate failure with pain or embarrassment. Another place it might come from is perfectionism. Perfectionism, if you hold yourself to unrealistically high standards, or possibly even small mistakes feel catastrophic. Or comparison culture, constantly comparing yourselves to others online or just in life in general. It can make any setback feel like you're falling behind. Even the fear of failure might come from past experiences. If you failed once and it hurt emotionally or socially, and now your brain just wants to try to protect you by avoiding similar risks altogether. But, the fear of failure, it doesn't just protect you from pain, it also can rob you of growth. You might avoid, if you've got the fear of failure, it might be quite common that you avoid trying new things. You also might procrastinate or self-sabotage. You might procrastinate out of the fear of failure. You just are telling yourself you're so focused on failing or the fear or embarrassment that comes with failure that you just procrastinate and put it off because you're anticipating failure and the negative emotions and impact that come with that. Another, the fear of failure, it might be that you stay in your comfort zone. And as we know, staying in your comfort zone is not how you grow. You grow by stepping outside your comfort zone. It can also, fear of failure, it can also rob you. You might talk yourself out of opportunities. And ironically, in trying to avoid the pain of failing, you actually end up experiencing the pain of regret and stagnation and unfulfilled potential. So it's not, the fear of failure, you might fear stepping outside your comfort zone and those uncomfortable feelings, but would you rather have the uncomfortable feelings of growth or the uncomfortable feelings of regret? Just think about that. So let's discuss how to break through the fear of failure. Well, you can redefine the failure. You can stop seeing failure as the opposite of success. Instead, you can see it as part of success because every successful person has failed. If you think about it, they've failed many, many times if you look at it that way. The difference is they used it as a lesson. So, for example, instead of looking at failure as this negative topic, just reframe it and think of failure as learning. If you look at it as learning, it's going to help open up your mind and look at everything in a new light. It's going to help you look at everything with a growth mindset. If you look at, instead of calling it failure, call it learning. But there's, try this for kind of reframing. So instead of saying, I failed, so I'm not good enough, reframe it. You can say, well, I failed, so I learned something that brings me closer to success. You can also detach your identity from failure. So failing at something, it doesn't mean that you're a failure. It just means you took action and now you have feedback. So you can separate your actions from your worth. Also, learn to take small risks often. And this will help you minimize that fear of failure. So start building the failure resistance by taking small, low-stakes risks. The more often you step outside your comfort zone, the more you teach your brain that it's safe and even empowering to try and fail. You can also visualize the worst-case scenario. So what's the worst that could happen? Sometimes writing down the worst possible outcome helps you realize it's not as scary as your brain is making it seem. Then create a plan for how you'd handle it. And then celebrate the effort, not just the outcomes. So you can start applauding yourself for trying. The effort to take action, even when scared, is a powerful win. And so again, I just want to emphasize that, if you're one of those people that tends to fear failure and, the side effects that come with it, or, the embarrassment, or you're you focus more on the negative impact of failure versus the positive outcomes that can come from stepping outside your comfort zone. Just reframe it, and instead of calling it failure, just calling it learning. Okay, so you're not failing. When you're trying something, you're learning. And this happens with everything, right? This is the only way people get better at anything is through trial and error, or just through practice. In practice, nobody's perfect when they're practicing, are they? They're just perfecting. They're getting more familiar and more comfortable with a particular action or a behavior. For example, so I'm a Utah kid. I grew up in Utah, and as you know, Utah's well known for skiing, snowboarding. I grew up doing sports, even skateboarding type things. And when I was younger, I absolutely loved snowboarding, going snowboarding with my friends. I was the one that I always went to the terrain park whenever I could. And the terrain park is the part of the ski slope that has like the jumps and the rails, the things that are, that can tend to cause you to get hurt if you're not careful. But I loved going to the terrain parks when I would go snowboarding. I loved it. And there were times where I would fall. I'd hit one of those rails, the metal railings. I'd bang up my shin. It'd get split open. I'd bruise myself up. But I was so determined to get good at it that I didn't let the pain of the falls hold me back from getting good at what I wanted to do. And so I looked at that as learning and not failing. If I would go off a jump, or I would go on a rail and slide down it and fall, I was willing to do that because I wasn't focused on the pain that might happen from failing. I was focused on learning and getting good at it. Same with, even like, for example, skateboarding, kind of a similar situation. I've fallen plenty of times. You're on concrete and you can hit your head if you're not wearing a helmet, which I didn't always wear a helmet. I'd get gashes and things like that. But it was more, the more that you focus on what it is you want to do, and you acknowledge that there's going to be bumps and scrapes along the way, it's what helps push you forward. It gives you that drive. And then you don't look at it as failure at all. You just look at it as learning, and just the side effects and the impacts that come with learning new things. Even with, people playing sports, basketball, for example, people that want to get good, they are going to continue to shoot hoops. They're going to practice. And of course they're going to miss a lot of shots, but they don't care about how many shots they're missing. They're just focused on continuing to make more and more shots. And so once you start to focus on the reason for doing something, instead of just the negative side effects that come from it, that's what can push you outside your comfort zone, and it will help eliminate that fear of failure. So when you have when you determine what your why is, or your reason for doing something, the fear of failure just doesn't exist. You don't have that fear of failure. It's more of just learning along the way. And so I encourage you to just take those small steps just outside your comfort zone and think about what it is that you want to do and why. And if you focus on that and acknowledge that there's going to be learning curves, that there's going to be irregularities along the way that come with learning and practice, your fear of failure will slowly diminish. But with that, I appreciate you listening today, and I'm going to have some more episodes that will discuss further mental barriers, for example, like perfectionism and imposter syndrome, things like that. But I do appreciate you listening to me today, and if this resonated with you at all, I would appreciate you subscribing to the podcast and even possibly sharing it with others so that the podcast can grow, and also so that my coaching business can grow as well. I'd love to help you or anyone that you might be aware of that has some mental barriers, or they're just wanting to reach that next step and next level in their life, whether it be work related, or just personal growth related. I'd love to help. So anyway, I appreciate you listening, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you.